We just wrapped up today's podcast recording, and today's guest just really has a fascinating story about her journey with MS. And it's a really good episode to replay if you're a practitioner or a patient dealing with MS, or honestly, any autoimmune disease for that matter. And if you're someone that believes that your beliefs don't actually have an effect on your physical body or disease state, today's episode is really going to change your mind and just kind of give you all the tools and hope that you need to kind of start that healing path.
I agree. I think this guest's attitude alone, her enthusiasm, her passion for the work that she does is really contagious. So let's get to it. Let's not waste any more time. We'll jump in and learn more with Melissa Rose. Today, we're joined by Melissa Rose, an applied functional medicine practitioner specializing in complex illness and rare autoimmune conditions, who is also a published author, educator, and practitioner mentor. Her approach is deeply rooted in the belief that recovery is not only possible, but sustainable. As the founder and CEO of Sagebrush Wellness and Autoimmune Recovery, Melissa applies lessons learned through her personal battle with MS to empower others. Today, Melissa will share her insights on the power of addressing the root causes of illness, her innovative tiered approach to healing, and how she guides her clients through their recovery journey, celebrating each victory along the way. Let's dive in and learn more about Melissa. Melissa, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, you guys.
Yes, we are too. Okay, so let's kick it off. I'd love to hear your personal story. You told us prior you started with symptoms of MS at age 9, with the diagnosis at age 33, with a life expectancy of 50 years old. What were those first signs in childhood? It sounds like it took a while for that diagnosis, but in childhood, what were you experiencing? What was that like?
I can remember. So there were 4 of us in the family, right? And we lived out in the middle of nowhere. So after we had supper, which is what we called it, supper, not dinner. After supper, we just were like, colts turned out in the pasture, playing, carrying on, whatever we wanted to do, very active, working off the steam. And I remember sitting at the edge of the lawn, watching everybody else playing and doing cartwheels and, just having a ball. My body hurt. I was so tired. And I'm like, is this what it feels like to be old? And I didn't know at the time. I know now that that was the beginning, because I never had the energy and school was hard for me because I never felt like I could think clearly. Now I know that's brain fog, but it's like math was pulling teeth. Once I got past 1 or 2 steps in a math problem, like algebra was awful. It's like I couldn't continue the thought processes through. Now I know what that is. Through my growing up years, periods were crazy terrible. A lot of swelling, didn't know what that was about. I remember when I graduated from high school and before I went to college, that summer, my mom took me to a neurologist because I was so tired. And every period was just crazy. I couldn't get my iron up. And she's like, I think you're getting MS. Well, the neurologist didn't find anything. So just, go home and sleep, honey. It's okay. You'll be better tomorrow. And by the time I was in my young adult years into college, it was bad. It was bad. Like trying to finish school was crazy. And then I got married, started my life, but I was sleeping 18 hours a day if I could. My left side had started to go numb. That was scaring me to death because I didn't have feeling in my hand anymore. By the time I got to my diagnosis, my whole left side there was no feeling at all. Dragging my leg, my right side was losing feeling, like to pick something up, just picking up my teacup like this, I had to pay attention and really look at it and make sure that my hands were closing like they're supposed to. No glass, anything left in my kitchen. I dropped it all, broke it all. Everything was metal. And for me to walk, I know I'm a stubborn German, but I didn't want a wheelchair. I didn't want a cane. I didn't want a walker yet. And I should have had all three of those things. But
And this was your early 30s at this point.
Yes, I was 28, 29, 30 when I got to this point where, and I had three little boys, right? Boom,
Wow.
boom, boom. I think the farthest apart is 15 months. And, you know, to carry them around and try not to drop them. Picking up laundry baskets, getting that basket to the laundry room, just to fixing meals without dropping things, breaking things, whatever. I had two businesses I had started. Ended up I sold one, closed the other because I couldn't keep up with any of it anymore. So when I got my diagnosis, I mean, good grief, I was 33 and telling me that I have, you know, if I'm lucky, I'll be able to be mobile until I'm 45. I'm 47. Gonna be 48 here in about 2 weeks.
That's
And,
incredible
telling me
and
I could
fantastic.
possibly be dead by 50.
And you had a family history, it sounds like, because
My
your
mom.
mom had suspected it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, still took all that time to get the diagnosis.
And in the meantime, did you see multiple doctors, or were you just thinking, oh, just since you grew up with it, you thought some of it was normal?
But also I had this huge fear of knowing what it was. I had this terrible intuition that it was MS. And if so, I didn't want to own it because I knew what it would look like. I'd watched it. And I was like, oh,
It's
I
very
don't want
powerful.
that to be me.
And so I'm wondering, Melissa, what was one of the first light bulb moments you had in your path to healing? As far as, did you try traditional medications, or was there a breaking point you said, I have to go a different path, or I have to look for additional therapies and root cause? Was there a moment you remember?
Yeah. And it was almost like a default whatever. So that happened when I was in the appointment with my neurologist, who was like, I'm sorry, Melissa, but you have MS. Like my brain kind of went, just kind of froze. And just intense fear around, what was coming. But in that conversation, there are two pieces that I remember. One was he wrote down on a prescription pad 2 different medications that he wanted me to make a choice of which one I wanted to use. I didn't know what they were at the time. And because my brain was like, I was like, can I take these home and research and tell you, get back with you? In my research, they were both very strong chemo drugs. And looking at the side effects and looking what they were going to do to my body, I'm like, well, I'm already on this road. Why should I increase the damage that's happening in my body? So I chose to not do it. But I didn't know what to do. So there was about a 1.5 year period there, maybe 2-year period, that I really didn't do anything. But the moment of saying, I don't know what to do, but I don't want to do that, I think was one of my deciding moments of, okay, I really don't know what forward looks like, because I didn't know about this world of alternative medicine. I had no idea that there was like naturopaths. I didn't know that there were.
How did you find us? How did you find the whole world of
by
integrative
accident.
and functional medicine?
By accident. There's no accidents. But our family moved to a new state, new region, whatever, for a job. And a new friend that I met, she kept after me. You need to come see my doctor. You need to come see my doctor. I'm like, I've been poked and prodded by doctors. They never tell me anything fun. I really don't want to go. So thankfully, she didn't give up on me. And I ended up in the office of a chiropractor who was also a functional practitioner. And we worked on the whole chiropractic stuff. That was great. I needed it. But in the meantime, he's gently going, how about if we work on the other things that are sideways in your body? And I really didn't think that anything would happen. But I was like, okay, sure, I'll try it. And I started to get better. And I had no idea that there were other ways of looking at multiple sclerosis rather than the traditional medical route. And I tell you what, that got my attention fast. And it took me about 2.5 years to fully recover. But I have been symptom-free for over 7 years now, and the latest neurological test I did last fall, which is available to my clients, obviously, because I work with people with MS and all the fun neurological things. Zero MS markers. It's possible.
Amazing.
And I had no idea.
So I know in your practice, you don't just work with patients with MS, you work with a variety of autoimmune disease now, kind of looking at everything all together. So I do want to ask you, when it comes to autoimmune disease in general, like where does it start? You know, what are some triggers that you're seeing, or is it kind of different for everyone? Or I see a lot of practitioners refer to it as a perfect storm of a lot of different things coming together. I want to see what you're seeing in your practice.
I would agree with the perfect storm piece, but the storm for each person is different. So a lot of what I see for my clients, and it doesn't matter if they have lupus or fibromyalgia or RA, rheumatoid arthritis, you name it, type 1 diabetes, all of those things, where they have commonality is the body gets to a place where it cannot handle what's going on its own. And what things end up on this side of the scale really like compounding, and then the body just can't keep up with everything, and we end up with an imbalance that then it becomes an immune system imbalance. Like the immune system is working so hard, or has been working so hard, and then becomes depressed because it's just out of steam. Some of the most common things I see as triggers are things like a really traumatic event, like being in a car accident, or, having your partner cheat on you, or, big things, or it can be big illnesses that come, like, pneumonia or bacterial stuff that just won't stop, or, you name it. It can be all kinds of different things, or traveling to another country, or even here and getting something like a listeria in your food. I mean, come on, it can be anything. But if our bodies are strong and resilient, it's like, we got it. Our bodies can walk through that. But if everything starts to come in together and our bodies just can't get on top of it, yeah, that's kind of where it starts.
It is like a perfect storm in some cases, and depending on where you are in life. And you paint that picture so beautifully, Melissa, of that mental, emotional trigger for some and the physical stressor for others. But the combination of the two, I think, is generally what can do it. And something, or maybe just one little infection could put you over the edge if you have this accumulating stress.
Exactly. And I think that right there, I love that you mentioned that, because for some of my clients, I mean, they're like, I just got the cold. But not taking in effect all of the other low in the background things that were just brimming under the surface, that their body was keeping, working really hard to keep it just kind of balanced. And then that was enough to just pop them over the edge. And it's like, well, let's take care of all of that and help your body get better.
Right. We can only take so much.
Exactly.
Right. I have to know, Melissa, is there one unique question you ask clients in your initial intake process? Because I imagine it's quite comprehensive, but is there one question that you think really stands out for your intake?
Do you believe, not here, but here, do you believe that you can be well? Because what I found is that people that are like, yeah, I know I can. I know it. I have no idea how, but I know it. Those people, there's no stopping them. They will get well.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that just soar through this process and live amazing on the other side of this and sustainably remain well. The ones who have trouble are the ones who are like, actually, I don't. I don't believe I can be well. And I'm like, wow. Because
Yeah.
we can do all the right things and they're right. They won't be well.
Where do you guide those patients, or what do you do next for those patients? Are you referring to health coaching? Are you referring to therapy? Are you saying maybe come back to me even?
Depends.
Mm,
Depends. If we have time in that intake call, we really dig into it. Because it could be that they don't actually feel that way. It could be something that's
mm,
left over from their research, because nowhere in the research for any autoimmune disease does it ever say you can get better. It can be left over from sessions with a therapist. It can be left over from meeting conventional specialists that say, there's no up from here, just get ready to go down.
mm.
But if we can peel away kind of that crusty belief system that really isn't theirs, we get to see the real inside, because generally people won't even contact me if they truly believe they can't be well. And we
Mhm.
work through that belief system. And sometimes I give them things to do. Sometimes I refer out to someone who is working with mental health or counseling that can support them around that and tell them come back when you're ready. But a lot of times when we work through all of those pieces, they're like, actually I think I might be able to get better. I'm like, yeah. So do you want to start now or do you want to wait? It's up to you.
Right. Yep. Makes sense. And what about, I'd love to jump into functional medicine testing a bit. And I'm curious, so I'm sure you have plenty of clients with established diagnosis of MS. I'm curious, what patterns do you see on your favorite tests? Ones that you're generally running. And again, we don't want to generalize in functional medicine. We have to individualize our plans, of course. But I'm sure there are tests that are go-tos for you. So do you notice any patterns, for example, on stool testing or other tests, micronutrients? I'm really curious in those folks with MS.
Yeah. I love this question.
Oh,
Geeks
good.
unite. I don't know. Because one of the things that I didn't know at the beginning of my journey, oh, pardon me, was that we can actually know what is driving this in our bodies. Our bodies don't do this for kicks, right? And we can know what's driving this. So I usually start with two different tests. One is the food sensitivity test. Second one is the gut test. And what I find often with a food sensitivity test, and we need to test deeply, not just IgG testing, is that many times that can be whatever we find on that test, and following the reduction or elimination of the foods that we need to can create really quick relief, can make a big impact on symptoms. So in the gut testing, what I find is, I love this. Often when we go into doing the gut test, especially the ones that I use with Vibrant Wellness, is that they may or may not have bacteria in the gut that affects, or what we would call affects, MS. And then we get to have that conversation. Do you actually have MS? Do you want to
Mhm.
own that diagnosis or not? And that leads us into, let's just work on what we see. Let's address it sustainably, and see what happens. My favorite test, however, for people with neurological symptoms and MS is the neurozoomer. So, really understanding what is happening in the brain and in the central nervous system, being able to see that clearly. Micronutrients, that one we use if we need it. A lot of times there are serious, how do I say? I don't want to say malnutrition, but places where the body is without what it needs. But back
What are
to
some of
the
the most common deficiencies that you see on the micronutrient?
vitamin D is a big one. Magnesium is another. Almost every MS client is deficient in those. As to say, other commonalities, they're so wide that it would be hard for me to put something other, like bees. RBs, a lot of times those are low, but not always. There's a wide range there, but usually I see magnesium and vitamin D that are low.
And you mentioned food sensitivities, Melissa, so I don't want to skip over this question because I'm curious if you're not seeing dairy and gluten popping up on food sensitivity testing, because we know that there's different ways we can test for food sensitivities. As you said, there's different serology markers. We can test on the peptide level. We can test on the protein level. Yeah. Curious for, and whether it's MS or not. And I love that you really put the power back into the patient's hands there. And as far as, really questioning it, but gluten and dairy and sugar, even if we're not seeing evidence on testing, I'm curious, do you do a trial period of elimination there for those clients?
Generally, I do, simply because one of the bottom layers of most autoimmune conditions is leaky gut. Gluten, dairy, and sugar are the trifecta that really enhances leaky gut, makes it worse. Sugar isn't good for anybody on any level. It is terrible, especially if you have a neurological situation going on. So is gluten, even though it doesn't show up. Dairy, often we go without that for a while, and if the body isn't actually having an inflammatory reaction to that, we may or may not bring that back in. Same thing with gluten. If their body isn't having a complete reaction to it and they're fully recovered, their markers look amazing, then we can talk about bringing that back if they want to. Most people don't. They're like, I don't miss it. I'm not hungry for it. Same thing with sugar. Once they take that out, it's like, I don't want it. It's just not good for me. I'm like, you're right. It's not good for you.
And again, you let them experience it. You let them make that decision. That's so empowering and important to make note of, because I think a lot of practitioners just say, well, we see the research, we see how inflammatory it is. I feel that you should be off this indefinitely. And then I think there's that temptation when my provider tells me I can't ever have it, I might want it more, rather than having that experience and saying, well, I know that I'm better off without. And that's my style. Go ahead, Melissa.
I was going to say, like, sometimes when you go on that elimination, all it does, or all that it takes to really realize like how beneficial it is to be off of gluten or dairy or sugar, is that one indulgence after the elimination. You're like, you know what, this feels horrible. And sometimes that's, the lesson that they have to go through and be like, I actually am very, very much better off without it. So, yeah, I definitely believe that the personal experience, kind of let them experience it themselves, goes a long way.
Yeah. Can I tell you a quick story about that?
Please.
I had a gentleman with lupus. We were making wonderful strides, and we got his food sensitivity test back, and he was highly reactive to dairy. We'd already mostly taken it out, but he couldn't let go of his ice cream in the evening. And he'd done all the things right, try to wriggle around and figure out how to keep it. And bless his heart, he was just the sweetest guy ever. And so we saw that come through. He had eliminated it for a month already, and he saw it highly reactive. He's like, can I do dairy for just 3 days? Kind of to say goodbye. And he did that. And he called me the second day. He was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't even move today." I'm like, "Are you still going to do your full 3 days?" He's like, "Yes, I'm going
After the first
because
day?
yes, I'm going to because this is it. This is my last hurrah. I'm done. I'll never do it again." And he kept his promise, but oh my goodness, he couldn't even get out of bed by the third day. I'm like, "Dude, was it worth it?" He's like, "Well, I'm not so sure about that."
Some people have to
But
hit rock bottom to make those changes, I guess.
yeah, I was just like, "Oh, dude, I would not have the I don't know what, like, stamina to do that." He was one tough guy.
It's a different
So,
mindset.
but that was enough for him to go, "Okay, I know gluten is not good for me because this is what it does. I can't do this. I wanna be present for my wife, my family." He had a wonderful,
Right.
thriving business, and I was like, I can't do that." So, it truly was his last hurrah.
Melissa, I do have to ask you in general, since we're on the topic of sugar, dairy, and gluten, all of our favorite inflammatory things, what dietary protocols do you see work best in general for autoimmune patients? I know you do food sensitivity testing, so obviously everyone's results are going to be a little bit different, but is there a certain protocol like autoimmune paleo I hear a lot, or is it really so unique?
I don't I don't do that. I don't recommend protocols. We build everyone's protocol as the test results come in. And we also use journaling a lot. Like I'm doing that right now with a young lady who has multiple sclerosis. We've looked at her food sensitivities. She's already taken out those foods, but we still have flares happening as a result of certain, meals that she has. So there's two different things that can go on there. One is a straight up food sensitivity. Your body's having an inflammatory reaction to whatever food. The other can be that your body's not able to break down a food or group of foods. And that can also cause an inflammatory response in the body. So with her, we're really picking apart those pieces right now and really using journaling to be able to understand that and supplementation and working on her digestive process and how she eats, all the fun things. But to just recommend a protocol, I choose not to do that because for two reasons. One, why take out a food if you don't need to? Two, if the protocol is built in a like a collaboration between myself and the client, it's theirs and they can own that. And it makes it much easier to say, no, I'm not going to do that because I know that food is not good for me. Not because it's on some protocol that doesn't have anything to do with me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually really like that approach because they're so involved with actually creating it with
Mhm.
you instead of just being assigned like, hey, scratch everything you know about eating well. This is what you're gonna do, this cookie cutter, you know. I like that they're so involved in the process there with the journaling as well. I think that's so important.
It's huge. I love it when we go into a session and they're like, see what I found.
They become
Look
their
what
own
I
talent.
discovered. And I'm like, yes, awesome. Because once I learn how to use that journaling in that way, it's like, oh, now it's a tool that they can use not just when they're working with me or somebody on my team, they can use it forever, never, amen. When life goes sideways and they need to get really investigative.
Yeah, some of the greatest health coaches and nutritionists and practitioners, they give their patients all these tools. So like, hey, so that you can do this long term and that I don't need to hold your hand, you know, and tell you what to eat the rest of your life. You're really tuning into their own intuition, their gut feelings, what makes them feel good, and kind of learning how to communicate again with their body. I love that.
Exactly. When we talk about root causes,
Mhm.
a lot of times some of the root causes is not trusting our own intuition and not trusting what we learn from our body or what we feel like our body wants us to do or shutting down the ability to even hear that. And so it's kind of an undertow of all this owning, own this again. Use your own intuition, use your own, sense of, okay, this happens when I do this. Instead of having to have somebody outside to validate that inner wisdom. So when we talk about root cause, sometimes that being separated from our own wisdom and not trusting our own wisdom could have led to some of the root causes and some of the just like, what do I do now? And the stuckness and the lost feeling of, somebody outside of myself has to fix me because I don't know how to fix me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes total sense. And I think we're bombarded with so much nutritional information, wellness information that it's just we're
Yeah.
constantly taking all of this in. So it is training us, like you said, to not listen to our own voice. I do like that you brought that up. So thank you.
Yeah. Because we actually have all that wisdom inside. And if we can uncap that and know how to use it and then learn to trust it through this process, 10, 20 years down the road, they're still using those tools. I'm always a phone call away in their back pocket if they need me, but I want them to be able to walk on their own 2 feet. Just so strong.
And staying on the topic of sustainable wellness and moving forward and the different treatment protocols that you're creating for your patients, I noticed that on your website you have three different programs that I saw, or three different paths for patients that include everything they need to kind of complete that transformation instead of just a one-off consult, a one-off test, a one-off supplement. It's just full encompassing. Here's everything you need to get better. Have you
Yeah.
noticed that patients have better outcomes when they commit to an entire program like that versus just coming in and following up? And, what kind of led you to create, okay, we need to start making programs instead of just appointments?
Oh, I am so glad you asked that question. My first 2 or 3 years in practice, I did that. We would do an intake and then a follow up and then a follow up. And by the third or fourth follow up, when the changes were so small, I mean, I need 3 to 4 months to get really like heart moving, if you will, sustainable results for people. It's not a fast turnaround. And the testing that we need to do, we have to wait for the results to get back. Like people would get like disinterested and pull back and try to do something else. And it would create this pattern in their life of just popping in here and there and getting a short start and then never finishing. And so they never got better. They just got worse and more confused. And for me as a practitioner, that breaks my heart because I knew what could happen for these precious people. That's why I do what I do in a package, because if they are committed and all in, let's do this for like 6 months is my shortest package. By the end of 6 months, we have got sustainable, measurable changes happening in their world. If they choose to re up and do another 6 months, heck yeah. Some people do this for 3 years with me, especially somebody who's been sick for 30 or 40 years. It takes time. But if I have that commitment from the client and they have actually given themselves that commitment, I'm not just popping in to see if this works after the first session, we can actually achieve wellness. But without that level of I'm in for the journey, I can say I've not seen that ever work, at least in my practice. So that's why I made the switch. This is about my people getting well.
It's a commitment on your part, absolutely. And that's very clear to see that you're so passionate about it. It's beautiful. Melissa, how do you stay up to date on the latest and greatest treatments for MS? And, because I'm sure that the programs are ever evolving. So I'd love to know, and how would you speak to listeners who are practitioners also? How do you stay up to date?
My greatest teachers are my clients. I love the research. I love going to conferences. I love learning from other practitioners. I love, all that. But I can take that home to my practice and go, okay, let's put this in, let's incorporate this and see how it actually works. And if it doesn't work in practice, quite frankly, it goes right out over my shoulder. Not interested in things that don't work, because I believe we learn the best from the bodies and the precious people that we're working with. There's so much wisdom to be gained there. So I love research. I love all the new stuff. But if it doesn't make sense and work in practice for people in real life, I don't have time for it.
And Melissa, I know you mentioned earlier about asking your patients on intake forms about their belief in well, but is there anything else that you find particularly helpful on your intake forms that you think every other practitioner should be using in their practice?
So I like to dig into three main parts in my intake. One is about the belief system. We already kind of touched on that. Two is a comprehensive way for them to write down their symptoms or record their symptoms, and then like how bad they are, like rate them. Because we'll use that scale as we work through the programs to be able to say, when you came in, your joint pain was a 9. 3 months in, it's a 4. It's still there, but it's a 4. Like, we need to have that like baseline. But the third thing that I like to bring in is a very comprehensive functional assessment. So really looking at using symptoms, looking at each of the kind of the big categories. Do we have mold toxicity? Do we have heavy metal toxicity? Even before we get into the testing piece, so that we can have some sort of a breakdown to help push us in the right direction. Because another thing is, I'm not into necessarily doing tests just because. I like to have a reason to head into that testing. So those are kind of the three big pieces that I bring into that. Four. The other one is a timeline. How did they get here? How did their dis-ease process come here? That's huge, especially in looking for root cause, because there's clues all through that. So that's a huge qualifier for me as well when we're thinking about testing. So if somebody lived in an old house and their bedroom was in the basement for the first 12 years of their life, and they remember all this black stuff on the wall, we probably should do some mold testing, even though they
Yes.
don't have mold symptoms.
Right. The timeline is extremely important. And I think a lot of people overlook certain things that we are going to find significant.
Exactly.
So it's a really good reminder. What about health coaching, Melissa? Do you refer every client in your practice to meet with? I think you have health coaching in your practice. Do you refer everybody to the health coach, or really when is the best time, or who is the best candidate for referring to the health coaching services?
So I started out as a health coach, and I still practice as like that's in my practice. And Robin, who is our other practitioner on the team, she is a functional health coach. So a lot of times people like to even work with her because I'm always on the backside doing the geeky stuff. And some people really enjoy that because her approach is so gentle but so transformational that, yeah, we really, when people come into our practice, we really work on matching them. Are they going to work best with me or work best with her? Because on the backside, we're always back and forth. And if somebody needs to have a session with her, we do that. If one of her clients needs to have a session with me, we do that. So it's like you get the whole team. You start out with one of us, but you get everybody on the team.
You're collaborating. And
Yeah.
I'm all about the team approach, because we all have unique gifts to
Exactly.
provide to the clients and patients. So,
Yeah.
All right. And then one last question for me, Melissa. I'd love to hear more about your upcoming masterclass designed for women with MS.
Oh, thank you for asking. So, truth. I think we can have PTSD from a deep illness like that. I didn't want to do that for a lot of years. That's why I went, really focusing on the whole autoimmune thing. Because, yes, that's where my study and my expertise is. But to go back and really serve people with multiple sclerosis, I have to really access the parts and pieces of me that lived in that journey. And so it wasn't until like the beginning of this year, there's been this kind of thumb in my back. You need to start just focusing in on people with multiple sclerosis. Open a place for them in your practice that's just theirs. And I fought it for quite a few years because it was still so painful. But you guys, the recovery journey, that has its own brilliance and light and its own rocks and things in the way. But because this journey I've walked it, life has particularly prepared me to be able to work with people with MS. I mean, they've found me over the years anyway. Roughly half of my practice is people with multiple sclerosis. But for me to just lean in and really focus in on that, I feel like it's time. It's time for me to do that. And really walk through this journey with them. Not just as part of the autoimmune recovery family overview, all that, but really leaning in, because people with multiple sclerosis are told they can never be well. And that is a blank lie. I get to live it. So many of my clients get to live it. And if I have to stand on the top of the Empire State Building with a megaphone to tell everybody that, I will do so. I've not been ready to do that before now. And I'm excited to just unveil this. Wouldn't you know, it happened in March, which is MS month, but it's my heart. It's my heart.
It's so clear that this work is extremely important to you, and to give people this recognition who are suffering from MS and see how far you've come is immensely inspirational.
Good.
Thank you for that.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you, Melissa, for sharing this with us. And if you're a practitioner or a patient listening, be sure to check out all of Melissa's educational resources. We're going to make sure that we leave everything in the show notes too, so you can find it. And as we wrap up today's conversation with Melissa Rose, we've explored so deep into the complexities of autoimmune diseases, MS, and the transformative power of functional medicine combined with health coaching as well. Melissa's approach focuses on individualized care, advanced testing, and the integration of holistic practices. And she offers so much hope for those navigating the challenging path of autoimmune recovery. And before we close, I do want to end on a positive note with our thought-provoking question of the day. What does it mean to you, Melissa, to live a vibrant life?
It means being able to wake up in the morning, swing my legs over the edge of the bed, feel the floor, be able to get up fluidly without one thought of, how am I going to do this? It means being able to do whatever I want to do, to hike. Not even thinking about, oh my gosh, how long is this? Am I going to make it back? It means being able to do this work. I could have never thought of doing this type of work before. My brain was so foggy, it was a mess. And I was afraid to go back to school to even, can I retain anything? But to be able to walk into this work and help people, watch them, I get such a high off of that, you guys. Watch them get well. That's what that means to me. Like when my kids, hey mom, you want to go ride dirt bikes? Yeah. Where are we going to meet? We want to go hike whatever, Sacagawea Peak. Yeah. When do we go? It's like not having to think about, can my body do this? I'm like, heck yeah. What do you want me to bring? That to me is living a vibrant life. Not thinking about, oh my gosh, is my body going to hold up? Am I going to make it back? Am I going to be able to get out of bed today? That's what it means to me.
I love that. And where can we learn more about your work? Where can we find you if we want to learn more of your work or just connect with you?
Yes, autoimmunerecovery.org. So we just renamed and reframed simply because, okay, I hope it's okay if I share this. The vision for this is not just to be a practice. It is also to have, and why we did the .org thing for autoimmune recovery, is to have a nonprofit side. We're working on building that right now, that houses education for practitioners, that houses research. Oh my goodness, you guys, when people research for multiple sclerosis and all they see is, honey, be ready to be sick, there's no cure. We need research that turns that around. We know that in clinical practice, but we need the white papers to prove it. That's what I'm after. And then the third thing is scholarships for people who want to work with functional and alternative practitioners, but don't have the money. How many people have walked away from our work, my practice, because I always do pro bono, but I have so many I can do because I have bills to pay. And they walk away because I can't do it for them. And it kills me. Mm-hmm. So creating a space for raising money, creating scholarships. But that's what we wanted to do, along with the autoimmune recovery and the team that we're building there, is to create partnerships. Like, I can't do this. I'm only one person. I can't serve everybody that needs this. So how can we create a collaboration, even in the practice side, for individuals, for practitioners, that this is their world. They're good at it. They're movers and shakers. Creating collaboration here, but also in the nonprofit side, to be able to build a space where we can educate practitioners, have the white papers. We need those. We can turn the tide of what people assume. If you get this autoimmune condition, well, sweetie, just take the meds and hope your life is as good as it can be. It kills me. There's another way. We don't have to lean in and accept being ill. But how do we do this? That's what we're building with this autoimmunerecovery.org. And you can find us there.
Such an admirable call to action. And what a powerful way to wrap up. I'm pumped. And I don't think we've ended on that note before.
Yeah.
That kind of note in terms of, let's do this, let's raise money, let's support each other and open up access. So thank you so much for that, Melissa.
So a note out to practitioners. If you're going, okay, I'm in, how can I help? What are we doing? Contact me, you guys. We're building a partnership, collaboration. I don't know what you want to call it, but we're building a group of powerful practitioners that are in this to make a difference. Okay. And it's going to take an army to actually facilitate all of this. So if your heart's going, please contact me. Melissa@sagebushwellness.com or info@autoimmunerecovery.org. The party's already started. If you want to be a part of it, come in.
We'll be sure to make put your website in the show notes so that all of our listeners today can find you directly. And thank you, Melissa, for your time and being on the podcast today, just for sharing your expertise and truly inspiring story of recovery. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Your curiosity for knowledge and quest for better health is what keeps us going. And until next time, stay vibrant.
Thank you so much for being here today. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so we can continue to pay it forward together. And remember, the key to longevity is knowledge. Keep learning, growing, and tuning in to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast to discover the latest insights and strategies for optimal health. Join us again next week. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views expressed by guests and host are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy of Vibrant Wellness. As always, consult your healthcare provider before applying any recommendations that you heard here today.